It would help if I unmuted myself. Let's try it again. Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to Responsum's Navigating Nutrition Webinar for Chronic Kidney Disease. Thank you so much for joining. We are excited to have you connect virtually from wherever you are. My name is Jess, and I'll be your host for today's informative session. So we know chronic kidney disease is a condition that affects millions of people worldwide, and the right nutritional approach can have a profound difference in the quality of life for those living with it. For this webinar, we're excited, incredibly excited, because we brought in Lauren Levy, a renal dietitian, to share her expert insights, her love for all things nutrition, guidance, and practical tips to help you and a loved one to manage CKD through nutrition and diet. Before we begin, though, I'd like to cover a few housekeeping items. Questions and answers. Feel free to use the Q&A feature to submit any questions you may have during the presentation. Lauren will address as many as possible in the Q&A session at the end of the presentation. So as you think of questions, feel free to use the chat box or the Q&A feature, and we'll get to as many as we can at the end of the presentation. Recording. We've been asked, and yes, this presentation session will be recorded and made available to all attendees after the event. And finally, resources. We have compiled a list of useful resources, which we will provide at the end of the presentation. And we'll also provide these resources and a link to all of our attendees post-webinar. Without further ado, let's dive into the world of nutrition and CKD. I am incredibly excited to introduce our speaker, Lauren Levy, who will discuss navigating nutrition along the CKD journey. Lauren, the virtual floor is all yours.
Thanks, Jess. And thank you to Responsum for CKD for having me here on this webinar today. I'm really excited to talk to you about navigating nutrition for chronic kidney disease. As Jess had said, my name is Lauren Levy. I am a renal dietitian, kidney nutrition expert. And I have been working with people of all types and stages of kidney disease for well over a decade at this point. As most renal dietitians, I got my start working with people with dialysis and have now gone into private practice, and I work to prevent progression of kidney disease. I run my own virtual private practice, insurance-based private practice called Happy Health Nutrition, as well as I'm the director at CukeBook, which is a nonprofit whose goal is to make culinary nutrition a mainstay of kidney health. So today, we're going to go through understanding nutrition in CKD, managing nutrients, kidney-friendly meals, and dietary challenges. This is a lot to cover in a hour webinar. And so I really want you all to get some really great information from this webinar, but ultimately a understanding of how you personally can improve your general health and kidney health. So let's talk about understanding nutrition in chronic kidney disease. When you read things online or you get the handout from your doctor's office, it is very overwhelming to take in what can I actually help myself to do to improve my kidney health or maintain my kidney health. On this slide are multiple things that no matter what stage of your kidney health you're in, these are wonderful things that you can do to help your overall health. Maintaining a healthy weight, keeping blood pressure and blood sugar in range, taking medications as prescribed, not smoking, exercising, eating more plants. As a dietitian, I can't say that enough. And right-sizing your portions and following a lower sodium diet to potentially reduce the protein in your urine. When I work with people with kidney disease, I really talk holistically about where are you on your kidney path. With people with CKD who do not have or who are not on dialysis, what your ultimate goal through nutrition care should be is to prevent further damage to your kidneys, maintain your kidney function, and lessen the risk for progression of kidney disease. When we work together in dialysis, then at this point, dialysis is doing the function of your kidneys. It is your kidney. And so the focus of nutrition care goes away from prevention and into maintaining good nutritional status and physical function and lessening the risk of progression of other issues like heart disease. And then in transplant, you're trying to maintain good nutritional status, hold on to that kidney as long as possible, and minimize the risk for rejection and the side effects of medications. So we really want to take all of this in so that you can identify where are you on this spectrum, so that as we go through this presentation, you can pull out what is in fact important to you. So let's dive into CKD stages 1 through 5. Stages 1 and 2 are considered kidney damage, and typically people don't know that they have any type of damage at that point. And the reality is that our kidneys are actually made up of 1 million individual functional units called nephrons. And as we age, those units can become damaged and no longer functional. So we all naturally our GFR lowers, our function lowers over time as we age. People who do know that they have stage 1 or 2 probably either have had another issue that it's been called to their attention, or maybe they have a genetic background that predisposes them so that they're on a heightened alert. Maintaining good nutrition and health in this part, moderate protein intake, and a general healthy diet is always recommended. When we get into stages 3 through 5, non-dialysis, now we're a little bit more focused. You've probably also been made aware that you have chronic kidney disease. This is also typically when a nephrologist might be getting involved as well. The general tenets of the diet are to follow a low sodium diet, lower in protein, and you can see that there are 2 specific bullets there. And I highly recommend that you have help in determining your protein portions from someone like myself, or if you have a doctor that is also involved as well, to give you a target and understanding. We will also discuss protein as well in this presentation. Additional recommendations may also include low potassium, low phosphorus, and a fluid restriction. This is not always what happens. So that's why it becomes really confusing when you read things online. Many people don't have a potassium restriction, and the majority of people should actually be staying really well hydrated. But there are times when your doctor, your healthcare team is going to recommend to follow that prescription. This webinar is for information and understanding. You always want to follow your doctor's recommendation for sure. As someone progresses down the kidney path and is now on dialysis, we want to maintain that good nutrition health. Following a low sodium diet is ubiquitous for all of us, meaning all of us should do it. Now we're focused on more of a higher protein diet needs, and this is why sometimes we can have some confusing and conflicting information where someone is told to follow a high protein diet, but they're not on dialysis. And so you want to think about where you are in the spectrum. Many people who are on dialysis also follow a fluid restriction, and that can be given to them from their doctor or dietitian at the dialysis center. And they will most majority of the times also have additional recommendations around lower high potassium. And this is typically dependent on what type of dialysis and how often they're getting dialysis, and low phosphorus. So as we head into managing nutrients, and as you start to think about how does this apply to me, take a second, think about it. Did you identify as CKD and preserving function, dialysis and maintaining good nutritional health, or transplant and maintaining good nutritional health and minimizing the risks of side effects of medication and maintaining your transplant? Once you know that, Now we're going to dive into the managing nutrients portion, and you can say, okay, I know that my doctor has told me I might be more sensitive to this. I should be aware of this. This is a lot of information, so let's head on in. Sodium. As I had said, following a low sodium diet is important for everyone with kidney health. Sodium is actually a mineral that is used for nerve function, muscle contraction, and fluid balance. Too much sodium can increase your blood pressure. And so that's why following a low sodium diet is important, because we're trying not to increase our blood pressure and put more pressure on our kidneys. Foods that typically contain sodium or salt is salt. Any version of salt is salt. It's sodium chloride. As well as packaged goods like breads, deli meats, dressings, sauces. Those all have extra salt in them that we may not be aware of. Fast food, frozen foods, and canned products can also be sources of high sodium foods. But where does the majority of our sodium come from? It's actually in processed foods and restaurant foods. This diagram here from the CDC actually shows that 71% of all the food that we eat, that's 71% of all the salt that we get in our diet is from already processed foods and restaurant foods. So the salt that we add at the table is only actually 5% and in similar amounts for our home cooking and preparation. We want to take advantage of utilizing food choices to reduce that biggest portion. So we want to focus on the processed foods and the restaurant foods first, right? The lowest hanging fruit. Think about it that way. So how do we find ways to reduce sodium in our diet? When eating out, and we'll review this again, so don't worry. When eating out, choose restaurants where the food is made to order versus fast food. And what this means is really where you can make an alteration. So if you can ask for things like dressings on the side, that would be a better choice. It's going to limit your sodium than a place where it's one option. Ask for foods to be prepared without adding salt. This can often be done, like, for example, asking for fries without salt. Fries are never the healthiest choice, but this is an example of you can ask for no salt on that anywhere. Review menus ahead of time and go in with a plan. Ask for sauces on the side. Do not eat the bread at the table. Ask the server to take it away. The bread is extra sodium that you probably don't need, and you went to the restaurant to enjoy the company that you're with and the main meal. So leave the bread at the side. Consider sharing your entree with a family member or a friend. This one can be both cost saving as well as sodium saving. Choose plain steamed veggies or fruits as a side or in a main dish. So ask for the salad. And then when in doubt, ask for oil and vinegar as your dressing on the side instead of salad dressing. Simple oil and vinegar is usually very easy to get at a restaurant. Ways to reduce sodium in your home. The best thing you can do for your kidney health and overall health is to read your food labels. The foods that we bring into our homes from the grocery store and that we ultimately eat is the biggest way to change what we're doing for our overall health. So reading food labels and looking for low salt options can really make you continue to be able to have the foods you like, just in the lower salt versions. Choosing fresh foods and looking for no added salt canned products. Things like no added salt canned beans, diced tomatoes, broths. Those are really great options that are lower in sodium and you won't even notice you're missing it. Rinse canned foods, get that extra salt away, and do not add salt in our cooking water. Consider using spices and spice blends that do not contain salt. Some of my favorites are like red pepper flakes. I like to add a squeeze of lemon or lime on top of things, and make rice, meat, and beans fresh. There are options that are no added salt, especially in the rice and beans. Look, like I had mentioned earlier, looking for no added salt. But you need to read the food labels and be aware of what those are. And limit instant foods with sauces or added salt, meaning those frozen foods like the skillet meals that can be very convenient, that you just throw on your skillet and you cook it up and it's right there for you. Well, oftentimes those are loaded with a ton of sodium. Now we're going to dive into potassium. Potassium is a really important nutrient or mineral. It's used for nerve function, muscle contraction, and heart rhythm. Too much or too little can lead to irregular heart rhythm and an increased risk. And this is why potassium is so confusing for people with kidney health, because we don't want to negatively impact our heart, right? And the recommended goal for potassium is actually variable and based on your lab work. So this is where going back to your health team and finding out from your doctor or dietitian, do I need to be on a potassium restriction or not, is so important. And know that there are factors that impact potassium, not just food choice. Generally, as our kidneys are working as well for us, like stage 5 and dialysis, it becomes much harder to manage, as well as medications. One of the common medications for CKD, actually the side effect is increasing potassium. It doesn't mean you shouldn't take your medicine. You absolutely should. But you want to have a general awareness. It's not you necessarily. So you want to make sure that you're not beating yourself up. It's just based on altering choices. As well as constipation. We actually remove potassium through our bowel movements. So having a healthy regimen, once daily bowel movement, is a great way to limit potassium. So if you're constipated, you really want to make sure to figure that out. And then if you are on dialysis, frequency of dialysis can significantly impact potassium, both ways. If you dialyze every day, like people on peritoneal dialysis, they often need to eat more potassium. But if you're on hemodialysis or you miss dialysis treatments, many times you need to be limiting the amount of potassium that you eat throughout the day. So just remember, potassium recommendations are individualized. It is important to follow your doctor and dietitian's guidance, not Dr. Google and not helpful Facebook pages. Everyone is individualized. The goal for all people is to keep your blood potassium in range, not necessarily the milligram amount. The goal is to have a normal lab value. You will notice that labs range differently from one provider to the next. And so typically you'll see most goal ranges between 3.5 and 5.2. However, your doctor may have their own range within this that might be specific to you. But most importantly, I want you to have a potassium mindset. And what does that mean? It means if you've been told to limit potassium, or even in general, this is a great way to follow this mindset, whether it's sodium or, as we're going to talk about, protein next. Choosing mostly low to medium potassium foods as the main parts of your plate is a great way to start. And then choose those higher potassium foods less often and in smaller portions. And lastly, choose only one high potassium choice at a time. Don't double up things, because that's how you can, in aggregate, have too much potassium. So give yourself a break. There's lots of food lists, and we're not going to be talking about on this webinar, but use those food lists as an inspiration and use the low and the medium potassium choices and see how many of those things you actually really already like and eat often. Protein. Depending on where you are in your kidney path, you may be limiting protein, or you may need more protein or moderate protein. Protein, we use it for muscles and enzymes, bones and skin and hair and hemoglobin. You get adequate protein from both plant and animal sources. And your protein allowance is related to your goal of kidney health. Are you preserving function, or are you maintaining good health? Here on my one side here, we've got the list of animal and plant sources of protein. This is not an all-encompassing list, but it's a nice example to show both forms of animal and plant sources of protein. But how do we actually know how much protein we're getting? When we go to the grocery store, the things that we buy, especially meat products, they're not in the portions that your doctor or dietitian is probably outlining. And what that means is typically a portion of protein is about 3 ounces, and that's only the size of a deck of cards, both height and width. The last time I went to the grocery store and got a chicken breast, it was way bigger than that. And so when we're thinking about how much protein do we actually eat in the day, we're probably getting more than we realize. On average, the standard American diet does get way more than we need. And so understanding what type of portion sizes you're putting on your plate is important, especially if you're trying to preserve function. So these are estimates. 1/4 of a cup of nuts is about the size of a golf ball, and it provides 6 to 8 grams of protein. 2 tablespoons, which is the common serving for nut butters and hummus, and also has 6 to 8 grams of protein, is about a ping pong ball size. And fish, for 3 ounces of fish, that's really looking at a checkbook size. And most fish that I get tend to be bigger than that. And then the 3-ounce portion is a deck of cards of meat. And both of those meat animal products have much more protein per those usual servings than those plant proteins do. And then 1/2 a cup is typically about the size of a half of a baseball on a plate. And that is the serving size for beans, tofu, and lentils. And they usually have about 8 to 10 grams of protein. Now, these are all approximates, right? The other thing I always recommend to my clients is, instead of serving spoons, consider for a while using measuring cups as you're portioning out things on your plate for dinner. And then you can get a really good understanding of what does a 1/2 a cup of beans look like when you put it on your plate, for example. And this can also help you understand how much are you really getting. Phosphorus. Phosphorus is a mineral that is used with calcium to build bones and teeth. Phosphorus is also is used in our cell walls as a part of DNA and how we make energy in our bodies. Phosphorus is really a long-term issue, meaning that long-term high phosphorus levels are associated with the progression of CKD, bone disease, and hardening of the arteries. Now, I will say that phosphorus is tricky because phosphorus is not on the food label. So you can't just pull up your food label and show how many milligrams of phosphorus is in that product. Instead, where you need to find phosphorus is actually in the ingredient section. So you want to look at your food label and you want to look for the PHOS. And when you find it, that is where you have phosphorus added to your food. And the added form of phosphorus is what we're trying to really limit. So the example here is phosphoric acid. It could be calcium phosphate. There's lots of different forms of added phosphorus, and that's the phosphorus we want to target. The other way to also lower phosphorus is eat more whole foods. By eating more whole foods, we're actually limiting the amount of phosphorus that we absorb into our body. And so one of the first things that makes me think about is all the people I've talked to have said, but Lauren, my doctor said I shouldn't have oats or brown rice or those whole grains because of the phosphorus. Well, actually, phosphorus is absorbed at less than 50% from plant sources. And a lot of that's because it's bound up in the fiber. From animal sources, which tend to be high in phosphorus, you absorb about 40 to 70% of the phosphorus you eat. And then when it comes to the added forms of phosphorus, we absorb over 90% of the added form of phosphorus. And we don't actually know how much is in the food because all we know is that it's there on the ingredient list. So what are we supposed to do with that? When you're at the grocery store, you want to read the food label in the ingredients, like we mentioned in the last slide. And if that food has added phosphorus, put it down. And then pick up the next product and check, does it have added phosphorus? It probably won't, or it might not. Things like dark sodas, they tend to have added phosphorus. But things like lemonades or crackers or cookies or any other product, it might not. It's really about, did the manufacturer want to add that preservative to that product? So it doesn't mean you have to give up all of the foods in that category. It just means you need to read the label and look for the added phosphorus. So that was a lot. That was a lot of hard information. And that's the wonderful thing about attending a webinar like this, is you can always, and I encourage you to go back and rewatch if you're watching live, or pause, absorb, and rewatch in the future. Ultimately, you're trying to take in, where am I on the spectrum here? Am I preserving function? Am I maintaining good nutritional health? And what of those things apply to me? We know that a lower sodium diet is recommended for everyone, so that applies. But has your doctor or dietitian told you you need to limit potassium? Have they told you to limit protein? And have you been given a target for how much protein? And then do you even need to worry about phosphorus? Many people, by following a whole food pattern of eating, don't typically need to worry about phosphorus. But if you do, read your food labels and look for them on the ingredient list. Now let's talk about what you probably want to really understand, is creating a kidney-friendly meal. What we're looking for is balance. And if I can stress enough, is you really want balance. When you look at your plate should be set up like this one. Half of the plate, veggies and fruit, quarter of the plate, protein, and a quarter of the plate, whole grains. Oils are fine sparingly, and mostly you want to drink water. If you follow this plate method, you're going to naturally put a lot of the proportions of what we talked about already in the right amounts for you. And what this means is you're going to need to do some meal planning and meal prep, regardless of whether you're trying to waste less food, be cost conscious, lose weight, reduce stress, kidney health, going in with a plan for the week just really helps everybody. And although meal planning can be really tough for some people, it does not have to be overly burdensome. It is like anything else that does require practice. So I recommend start by looking through your cabinets, think about the week ahead, and make a menu. Just write down Monday, whatever, Tuesday, whatever. Then look at that menu and consider batch cooking what you can. Meaning, if there are multiple days that you have quinoa, for example, try and make quinoa a little bit ahead of the time and then reheat on the other days. Make a plan, but don't overplan. By being realistic and honest with yourself, you can reduce the decision fatigue at the end of the day, and because it's already been made. But if you don't want to eat a salad on Tuesday and you've got veggie fajitas on Wednesday and you'd rather eat that on Tuesday, it's okay to be flexible. But ultimately, by having your plan, you're going to less likely give up, order out, and say, I'm done, I'm tired. And when you do feel those ways, have healthy alternatives on hand. So things like freezing extra soup and having it in the freezer for when you're, don't know what to eat, or having a couple of frozen options that are on the lower sodium side that you can then heat in a pinch is a great way. And it's definitely a better choice than giving up out of frustration or giving up out of just pure tiredness at the end of a busy day and ordering out. Here are examples of some of the ways that you can actually meal prep and meal plan. So some great make ahead things are overnight oats or smoothie packs. Cut up some fruit, put it in a Ziploc bag and throw it in the freezer. You can make granola bars and eat off those. Things like for lunch, pasta salads, rice or beans, the make ahead single serving jar salads, because then it maintains the salad nice and it's not all soggy. Vegetable wraps or freeze ahead burritos. These are all kinds of things that you can have quick and on hand and have a plan. I'd already mentioned this, but parboiling things like rice or pasta that you can then reuse later in the week is also a great way to just get ahead of it and make a healthy choice. You can also use things like that you freeze ahead of time. So one of my favorite examples are veggie burgers. Homemade veggie burgers can be really delicious, and they often make way more than you're going to eat at one serving or one sitting. So you can wrap them up and stick them in the freezer. And then when you're in one of those days where you're just tired and you don't know what to make for dinner, you can pull that out. And that's a great thing to have on hand and easy. And then there's these other types of things that you can make ahead and use throughout the week as well. And ultimately, think about just simple ways to make the foods that you already enjoy. Some examples that are really high in sodium is like pizza. I live in the Northeast. We live for pizza. Well, the pizza dough is high in salt. The tomato sauce is high in salt. The cheese is high in salt. The toppings are high in salt, most likely. And all of a sudden, well, heck, you might as well give up and start tomorrow. It doesn't have to be the way it is. When your family orders pizza and you normally used to eat 2 or 3 slices, instead, make yourself a salad and just have 1 slice. Or make yourself an English muffin pizza. There are low sodium English muffins that you can easily toast, add a little bit of tomato sauce to, small amount of cheese, pop in the oven. Super simple, much lower in sodium, and a much healthier alternative. Same with frozen meals. You can, most frozen meals are high in sodium, But there are hidden frozen gems, and things like frozen veggies are oftentimes unsalted. Being wary of things that have added spices to them in the frozen section tends to send the triggers off on, you should read the food label because that might have added salt. But the plain veggies or veggie medleys, as well as sometimes they have rice like that too, that is just quick and easy, are great ways to have a low sodium swap in addition to your meal and reduce the amount of time and effort that you're spending in the kitchen. And same with crackers and chips and snacks. We saw originally in our sodium slides that we're getting a lot of salt from processed foods, but there are often low sodium versions that you can find. We talked about no added salt canned products, but what about our favorites like those crackers, chips, and snacks? You can find things like unsalted tortilla chips, unsalted pretzels, things like Skinny Pop that are low in sodium, or the hint of salt products that branding tend to be the things that are lowest in sodium. So if you see that hint of salt, it's another one of those idea bells. Oh, I should go check this out and read this label because maybe I can have this. And many, many times you can. Once you have found the things that work for you, just go back and pick that up the next time. It takes some investigation in the beginning, but after time, just like anything else, you already know, and the time in the grocery store goes down because you already know which are the healthy choices for you. Let's talk about eating outside of your home. This one is something that when I get a new person is one of the main questions asked. Well, am I ever going to be allowed outside of my house to eat? I can't ever eat outside of my house. Well, let's keep this same general mindset. Are we working to preserve function or maintain nutritional status? What are the specifics for you that you need to be aware of? Definitely low sodium. What about the protein and potassium? Okay, I've got that general understanding down. Now, how do I apply that when I leave my house? Because yes, you can still eat out. Choosing things like that are lower in protein, like ordering vegetables if you're focused on preserving function. Splitting an entree can be really helpful to keep our proportions correct, or automatically getting those leftovers. Heck, choosing a salad with dressing on the side. Skip the bread and read the menus before you go. If you want, when you go out with your friends and family, even to an individual restaurant, like an individually owned restaurant, most restaurants these days have their menus online. Check it out ahead of time and decide what you think you might like. So then when you sit down and you're having a good time with your friend or family member, you're already ahead of the game and you don't make that panic choice when the waiter or waitress shows up and it's not the choice that is healthy for you. Ask for no added salt where you can, and ask for dressings and sauces on the side, and just portion on the little bit that you need or want. And when it comes to large gatherings and holidays, just be honest and kind. Give yourself some grace. Bring a dish that you can eat. So when somebody invites you over, or if it's a holiday meal, say, I'd like to bring something, and then bring something that's going to mostly fill you up, that meets your needs, that everyone will enjoy. There are simple things that you can bring that definitely meet all those categories, and think about the things you like and that your family or friends would also enjoy. Consider eating before you go. No, this doesn't mean eat 3 meals plus that 4th meal, but instead don't show up starving, because you want to not overdo it when out of excitement for the foods that you have, or even worse, when you show up to that barbecue and all they have is potatoes, pasta salad and hamburgers, and you know that that's not what you would want to eat for your kidney health. Instead, have something ahead of time and be ready and prepared. Drink plenty of water. So making sure that you are staying hydrated, as well as sometimes when we're at those types of events, we just like having something in our hand. Bring a water bottle and have that with you, so that when you're done eating, you're not eating out of boredom or out of just habit. And instead, you can have that water bottle with you. And plan ahead. If you know what they're already going to be serving, then you already can get ahead of it. And consider exercise before going. So this really pertains oftentimes to some of those big holidays where you know the main event is those favorite few dishes, and it's often sitting around and visiting with people. Make sure you're looking at your whole day and exercise and plan to eat lower sodium, maybe lower potassium or lower protein earlier in the day, so that by the end of the day, you haven't overdone it. And then just simply be honest and ask. So say, what are you serving? Or if they say, do you have any dietary restrictions? Just say, I like to eat whatever way, and I'd like to bring whatever. Can I contribute? In summary from today, I'd really like for you to take a good understanding of what is your risk factor? Where are you on that spectrum? Make food choices based on your situation and understand that your situation is individual. And then have a plan. Having the plan will give you confidence and empowering yourself that you're doing the right things. Make healthy choices most of the time. We are all human. You're not going to make it 100% of the time, but with a plan and a purpose, you're going to make it most of the time, and you're going to be healthier for it. And don't forget to enjoy your food and enjoy yourself. I really want to thank Jess, and I want to thank Responsum for CKD for having me. Responsum for CKD is a free online community that provides trustworthy information, peer-to-peer support, and resources. I highly recommend checking them out if you haven't already, as well as CukeBook. CukeBook.org is a website that contains kidney-friendly, plant-based recipes, nutrition and guides written by kidney nutrition experts like myself. And our goal is to make culinary nutrition a mainstay of kidney health. And make sure that if you need more help, that you seek out a dietitian. There are many of us now in the virtual space, and we oftentimes specialize in something specific, like kidney health. Your insurance most likely covers medical nutrition therapy or nutrition counseling. So nutrition counseling is accessible. With that, Jess, I'd love to go through some of those questions that came in from our community and from ahead of time.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Lauren, for that presentation. I mean, I was not only managing our Q&A, but I have so many personal takeaways from make sure we eat our plants. We love our plants. Any version of salt is salt, right? You hear people, have recipes and they have all types of fancy salts, but salt is salt. So that was a great tip. Say no to table bread. That hurts a lot of people's feelings. I mean, I know that's the best part of dinner, the table bread, but we did certainly appreciate that tip. Follow your doctor, not Dr. Google, right? For advice. I think that is a phenomenal takeaway. It's all about balance. I think that's true for so much in life. So great. And finally, give yourself grace. So wonderful presentation. Bravo. Thank you so much. I have takeaways. All right. So we do have questions from those who pre-registered. Let's get into those first. And while you were talking, we had great engagement. We have I don't know if we're going to have an opportunity to get to all of them, but we'll certainly try. So with that, let's start with IgA, which is specific, right? It's a rare kidney disease, and we have 2 questions related to IgA specifically, so I'll get into those now. This person has IgA stage 3B and is leaking protein. What does that mean from a nutrition perspective?
Yeah, so just like you mentioned, IgA nephropathy is a rare kidney disease. And so oftentimes with IgA nephropathy, your nephrologist is going to be focused on that protein leak. Ways nutritionally to help with that is to make sure you're following a low sodium diet and that you're eating the right proportions of protein for yourself, meaning not too much. And looking through, especially in that portion size slide that I had used, is a good way to estimate where and gauge how much are you eating versus how much you should be eating. Not that those portion sizes are right for every single person, but it gives you a starting point.
Wow, so true and so necessary. So if you have IgA and that's specific, definitely go back and check out our protein slides for more information and check with your doctor. It's so individualized. Okay. Along with IgA, one question was about tomatoes and potatoes. What do you recommend for someone who has IgA regarding those dietary specifications?
Yeah, so with IgA being autoimmune, tomatoes and potatoes are really about potassium. Um, and so you want to follow your labs and your doctor's advice when it comes to, or dietitian's advice when it comes to that potassium restriction. If you are not on a potassium restriction, um, tomatoes and potatoes can be added to your diet. I generally, because of that safety piece we mentioned, am will discourage you from eliminating it, but being aware and mindful of the amount that you have. The other thing when it comes to potatoes is there's a process called leaching where you can actually limit the amount of potassium and leach it out of the potato, as well as with beans. And you can Google that leaching, but ultimately for potatoes, it's double boiling them. So things like mashed potatoes, where we already boil it, you could cut the potatoes, boil it, get rid of the water, boil it again, and then make your mashed potatoes. And that will have significantly less potassium than if you had not.
Wonderful. So it's all about the potassium and understanding how those levels work for your body.
Yeah.
Okay. Speaking of potassium, our next question deals with potassium. How do I know if I need to limit my potassium and phosphorus? So we'll start with potassium and transition to phosphorus.
Yeah, and actually, my answer is going to be interestingly the same for both. So you really want to follow your lab work. If you have never had a high potassium before and you've been eating all of these foods that are in that higher potassium section, there's a less likelihood that your potassium would be high. Same with phosphorus. Phosphorus doesn't always get monitored as closely because many people they check phosphorus and it's fine. And so unless your phosphorus is high, you don't need to be overtly as concerned, but you should always limit the amount of additives. It's just a good habit to be aware of and to do.
Definitely a great habit. We have a question about the keto diet. How do I manage a low carb, high protein, specifically for diabetes, and lower my protein for ultimate kidney health?
Yeah. And so the balanced plate method that I showed in this presentation actually is beneficial for both kidney and diabetic health. And however, when you talk about the grams of protein or the amount of protein, like you're speaking of, on that initial slide, the restriction for preserving function is less of a restriction than for those who are nutritionally stable and do not have diabetes. So you do want to make sure that the majority of your plate is non-starchy vegetables. You have that quarter of the plate of protein, plant protein preferably, but potentially animal if that's your choice, and then whole grains. And that whole grain carbohydrate source, having a lot of fiber, is really helpful to not make blood sugar spike as well.
Right. Yeah, it all works together. We want to make sure the blood sugar doesn't spike there. All right. So we have great questions too from our audience. They're pouring in, so I will get to them as fast as I can. We'll start with zinc. Is it okay to add zinc supplements in the diet? Why or why not?
Yeah, so what I would say with specific vitamins and minerals is that you should definitely go back and ask your doctor, because that can be an individual situation that, especially in a webinar like this, that I don't have enough background to make a recommendation. But adding zinc is something you could definitely refer or talk to about your nephrologist.
Yeah, for sure. It is so individual. So a lot of these questions are specific to the individual. So I'm going to select carefully because a lot of these, I think you will have the same response because they're pretty specific information. Is it okay? You reviewed this, but maybe they were out for this portion. Is it okay to use canned black beans but rinse them first?
Absolutely. You can use canned black beans and rinse them. You can even find no added salt canned black beans. And I would really encourage you, as a fun experiment, or maybe as a dietitian, I find it fun. Pull out, when next time you're at the grocery store, pick up regular black beans and then pick up the no added salt black beans. And I guarantee you, when you see the difference from the food label from one to the next, you will not buy regular black beans again, because we don't realize, like, you don't get any benefit. We don't taste the salt, right? With the beans. So you might as well choose the no added salt. It's a much easier choice and you're not feeling restricted.
No, wonderful, because Taco Tuesdays are a staple in my home, and that's
Absolutely.
just a minor swap that's so simple that could just make just a healthier choice overall.
Here we go. Yeah.
Okay. Are there any prepackaged foods that are better than others?
You know, really it comes down to reading the food label, because there is always the exception. And that's what I really love about working with people individually is I often get challenged in a great way, because I have clients that come back and they say, guess what, Lauren, I found this bread that is low in sodium. And I literally have a little sheet on the side. Let me write this down, because you can always find something that you like that's low in sodium. You just got to be willing to dig for it.
Got it. Yeah. And someone made the comment too, they came late and they asked, well, why not table bread? And I think it has to do, can you just review that more? I think that was a shocker to some people.
Yeah, absolutely. And I feel like I really knocked on table bread a lot. I'm so sorry to table bread. But so breads in general actually are a hidden source of salt that we don't really realize are sodium. And so you can actually pick up the bread that you've got in your pantry after watching this, and see how much sodium does it have in it. Most slices of bread have anywhere of 8 to like 11% of the daily value for sodium. And we eat bread in sandwich form, not the table bread, but in general, we eat sandwiches, right? So you're doubling the portion size for any bread. So before you start making a sandwich, you've already used most of your amount of sodium you should at that meal. So that's why with the table bread, as we sit and chat and talk and enjoy each other's company, all of a sudden, right, the loaf is gone. And you
Right.
don't even realize it. The loaf is gone, man. And we all are guilty. I know, like, we're all guilty. It might as well just be gone. So it's not there, because I won't notice it, right?
Exactly. And it's such a cultural staple piece for so many cultures. Bread is just a part of so many traditions, and it's really difficult to break. But when we are being aware of our sodium and we want to monitor and really be healthy, it's a conscious choice I think we should all make, and it would be beneficial.
Absolutely. And when we're out to eat, we're not going for the bread, right? I mean, it's a great benefit, but you're not paying for the bread. You're paying for the main event, right? So it's that other piece too.
Exactly. I want to make sure everyone can hear me. Sometimes my voice goes in and out, but we were just talking about the importance of recognizing sodium in your table bread for those of you who were just tuning in, and that's a no-go. But someone asked, well, what about high fiber bread with a variety of grains? Is that optional?
Absolutely. I'm not meaning to demonize bread by any stretch of the imagination. It's just a surprising source of salt and sodium that we don't think about. There's things like low sodium Ezekiel bread that has like virtually no sodium in it. So there's always an exception. And having whole grain bread that has fiber in it is a great option too. So not demonizing bread, but generally bringing awareness is what the goal is.
Wonderful. Yeah. It's all about awareness. That's for sure. Well, we have some great, if you all want to get your questions in, we have a couple of more minutes before we start wrapping up our webinar and giving thank yous. So far, Lauren, everyone says a really great job, great information. We appreciate this. So we really appreciate it, and it's coming through from our comments. We have one excited community member anonymously says, FYI, reading labels is so important. Just saw a low sodium product that had more sodium than a regular one.
Absolutely. I'm right there with you. Reading food labels unlocks a multitude of possibilities of foods you never realized you could have.
Okay, and last question before, are there any good, and so this is a personal question, I suppose, are there any recommended cookbooks that you recommend, or favorite kidney-friendly meal that you'd like to share with us?
That's a great question. So actually Taco Tuesday is a mainstay in my house as well, because you can make it very low sodium, especially using corn tortillas. That's one, as well as I feel like you can do it any way. You can do it fajitas, you can do it, beans, you can use lentils, there's tofu, you can use like anything. It's great. There are some really good cookbooks out there. If you're looking for more of a plant-based option, and I know you had mentioned a couple individuals with IgA nephropathy, the IgA or IgAN Foundation has a cookbook they put out that's fully plant-based. There are other cookbooks that may not be fully plant-based, but do incorporate some animal protein in there, which is in reasonable portions so that all of the nutrients align really well. As well, the Cooking Doc has one that I also enjoy because he's got a really great narrative in the front that I like, but that is not solely plant-based, but has a lot of really good stuff in there.
Needed to unmute. Okay, well, those are all the questions we have. Thank you so much, Lauren. We'll move towards wrapping up the webinar. I know we have a few more minutes. So we just want to thank everyone for joining our Navigating Nutrition webinar. Today, we've come to see that what we eat, how we approach our dietary choices can play a pivotal role in our overall health and well-being. But beyond all the facts and figures, I hope you absorb the underlying message that nutrition is a mindset. It's not a one-size-fits-all, and the power to shape our health really truly lies in our hands. Lauren, our nutrition expert, thank you so much for generously sharing your insight and your time and your expertise. Your wisdom has undoubtedly made this event both informative and inspirational. Thank you to those who have actively participated by asking questions. Your curiosity and enthusiasm fuel our mission to share knowledge and make it more accessible. And as you move forward, I encourage you to take what you've learned today and apply it to your individual lifestyles and health goals. We hope today's insights serve as a valuable compass for you. And don't forget to join our Responsum for CKD community app to stay connected and continue the conversation. We'd love to have you. Download the mobile app or join using the desktop computer to access additional resources and connect with people on similar CKD journeys. And you can also follow us on social media on Facebook and Instagram at Responsum for CKD. Once again, thank you for your time and your attention and your participation. We at Responsum for CKD look forward to welcoming you to future events. Until then, wishing you health and wellness and positive nutritional choices. Bye, everyone.